Most people think the Bible is a book about religion, rules, morality, ancient miracles. But the deeper you go into it, the stranger it becomes. Because beneath the wars, prophecies, poems, plagues, kingdoms, and resurrections, the Bible is telling one continuous story. A story about human beings hiding, and a God who keeps searching for them. That pattern begins in the opening pages of Genesis, and it quietly echoes all the way to Revelation. But to see it, you have to read the Bible the way ancient people would have experienced it. Not as disconnected verses, as a story unfolding across centuries. And once you notice the pattern, some scenes become almost haunting. Especially the first one. #the garden, before humanity learned to hide. In the ancient world, creation stories usually began with violence. Babylonian myths described gods battling sea monsters to build the world from chaos. Humans existed mainly to serve temples and feed the gods through sacrifice. Genesis opens differently. There is no cosmic war. Just darkness over deep waters. Then a voice. Let there be light. The universe unfolds through language. Order emerges from chaos. Land rises from oceans. Stars appear in silence. And then Genesis says something ancient readers would have found shocking. Humanity is made in the image of God. In the ancient Near East, kings placed statues of themselves throughout their empires to represent their authority. Those statues were called images. Genesis turns that idea upside down. Not just kings. Not just rulers. Humanity itself carries God's image. That line reshapes the entire story. Because in Genesis, humans are not introduced as slaves crawling toward distant gods. There are no temples yet. No priests. No sacrifices. Just a garden, and open relationship. At first, everything feels strangely peaceful. Water flowing through rivers. Trees heavy with fruit. No shame. No fear. Then the serpent enters the story. And notice what it attacks first. Not morality. Trust. Did God really say? It's a subtle shift. Small enough to miss. But the story is doing something important here. The serpent introduces suspicion into a world built on relationship. And humans reach for the fruit. Not because they're hungry. Because they want certainty. Control. Wisdom on their own terms. Then suddenly, the atmosphere changes. The silence feels heavier. Genesis says their eyes are opened. They notice their nakedness. They sew leaves together with trembling hands. And for the first time in the Bible, humans hide. Among trees they once walked beside freely. Then comes one of the most haunting lines in Scripture. God enters the garden asking, "Where are you?" Not because God cannot find them, but because something inside humanity has fractured. And outside the garden, that fracture spreads fast. When civilization grows. But the human heart doesn't. The Bible becomes surprisingly realistic almost immediately. Cain murders Abel in a field. Blood sinks into the ground. Generations pass. Cities rise. Music develops. Technology advances. But violence grows with civilization. The strange part is, Genesis never assumes human progress automatically fixes human nature. And eventually, the world becomes filled with corruption. Ancient Jewish readers often describe this moment as creation collapsing back into chaos. So the flood arrives. Rain pounds the earth. Floodwaters swallow cities. Families disappear beneath black water. Yet even here, the Bible preserves an unexpected pattern. Judgment, followed by mercy. Noah's Ark comes to rest on a mountain. A dove returns carrying an olive leaf. Creation begins again. Then humanity tries one more solution. Babylon. The Tower of Babel. In ancient Mesopotamia, massive temple towers called ziggurats were built to connect earth and heaven. Babel reflects that world perfectly. Humanity gathers in one place and says, "We will make a name for ourselves." That sentence matters more than it seems. Because throughout the Bible, humanity keeps trying to build identity apart from God. Power. Empire. Control. The tower rises upward. And then the story narrows suddenly. From all humanity, to one aging man walking through desert dust. Abraham. Abraham, the beginning of a promise. Abraham lives in a world of tribal gods and unstable kingdoms. People stayed close to ancestral land because survival depended on family networks and protection. Then God tells Abraham to leave. Leave home. Leave security. Leave everything familiar. And Abraham walks into uncertainty carrying only a promise. Through your family, the nations of the earth will be blessed. At first, it feels impossibly small. One family wandering through Canaan. But this becomes the thread running through the entire Bible. There's only one problem. The family itself keeps falling apart. Abraham lies to protect himself. Jacob manipulates his brother. Joseph is thrown into a pit by his own family before being sold into slavery. The Bible never hides these details. In fact, it almost emphasizes them. Its heroes are emotionally complicated people, capable of deep faith and terrible decisions. Then the story shifts to Egypt. And for centuries, everything goes quiet. No miracles. No rescue. Just slavery. Egypt, the empire of fear. To ancient people, Egypt represented stability and absolute power. Massive stone temples. Military strength. The Nile feeding millions. Pharaohs were viewed as divine figures maintaining cosmic order itself. And beneath that empire, Israel suffers. Brick making. Whips cracking in the heat. Children born into forced labor. For 400 years. And eventually, people stop expecting deliverance at all. Then the Bible focuses on one small scene. A baby hidden inside a basket coated in tar. Floating through Nile reeds while his mother watches from a distance. Moses. At first, nobody notices the child. Empires rarely notice small things. But the Bible often begins its turning points quietly. Years later, Moses stands before Pharaoh with a message that sounds impossible. Let my people go. What follows feels almost cinematic. The Nile turns red. Darkness covers Egypt. Locusts consume fields. Then comes Passover. Ancient Jewish families still remember this night every year through ritual meals. Lambs sacrificed. Doorposts marked with blood. Families eating quickly by torchlight, prepared to leave at any moment. Then the Exodus begins. Thousands move into darkness carrying children, bread, and memory. Behind them, Egyptian chariots thunder across the earth. Ahead of them, the sea. Then the wind starts. Violent. Cold. Relentless. Water rises beside terrified families as a pathway opens through chaos itself. But escaping Egypt physically turns out to be easier than removing Egypt from the human heart. And that tension drives the next part of the story. The wilderness, where people meet themselves. The desert strips everything down. No cities. No distractions. No certainty about tomorrow. Just sand, hunger, and dependence. At first, the people celebrate freedom. Then fear returns. They complain constantly. Panic spreads through the camp. Some even want to return to Egypt. Not because slavery was good. Because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. That observation feels painfully modern. People leave destructive relationships and still miss them. People escape addiction while mentally remaining trapped inside it. The wilderness becomes psychological. Then Israel arrives at Mount Sinai. Thunder shakes the mountain. Smoke fills the sky. People stand trembling at the base. And God gives the law. Modern readers often imagine ancient laws as random religious restrictions. But compared to surrounding civilizations, parts of the Torah were radically humane. Commands protecting the poor. Laws limiting revenge. Mandatory rest for servants and laborers. The story is trying to shape a different kind of society. But almost immediately, the people build a golden calf. In Egypt, bulls symbolize strength and divine power. Israel recreates the imagery they grew up around. And suddenly the deeper conflict becomes clear. Human beings constantly reshape God into something controllable. Something visible. Predictable. Manageable. The cycle continues for generations. Until Israel demands a king. The king's power, glory, and collapse. Israel wants what surrounding nations have. A throne. An army. A ruler people can see. So Saul becomes king first. Tall. Impressive. Deeply insecure. His fear slowly consumes him. Then David enters the story. A shepherd boy from Bethlehem carrying food to his brothers on a battlefield. Across the valley stands Goliath, enormous, armored, terrifying. Ancient warfare often involved champion battles where one warrior represented an entire army. David walks forward with no armor at all. Just stones. A sling. And terrifying confidence. For a moment, he feels like the perfect king. But the Bible refuses simplistic heroes. Years later, David abuses power, takes Bathsheba, and sends her husband Uriah to die in battle. And the consequences destroy his household from the inside. The story slows down here intentionally. Because Israel's collapse is not sudden. It's gradual. Compromise layered over compromise. Eventually the kingdom fractures politically before it collapses spiritually. Corruption spreads through Jerusalem. The wealthy exploit the poor. Violence grows. And the prophets begin speaking into the chaos. Isaiah warns Jerusalem, while Jeremiah watches Babylon closing in around the city walls. Their message is uncomfortable. The real danger is not foreign armies. It's the condition of the human heart. Then Babylon arrives. Temple walls burn. Gold is stripped from sacred spaces. Families are marched into exile across brutal desert roads. For ancient Jews, losing the temple felt like losing the center of the universe itself. Because the temple was not just a building. It represented heaven and earth overlapping. And now it's gone. The silence afterward feels unbearable. But buried inside the grief, the prophets keep whispering about a future figure. A suffering servant. A coming king. And after centuries of waiting, Jesus appears. Jesus, the moment the story turns. First-century Judea lives under Roman occupation. Soldiers patrol the streets. Taxes crush ordinary families. Public crucifixions warn people not to resist empire. Most Jews expected a Messiah who would overthrow Rome politically. Jesus arrives without an army. No palace. No military campaign. He walks dusty roads between villages, healing the sick and eating with people considered unclean. Tax collectors. Lepers. Outcasts. That detail would have shocked ancient audiences. In Jewish culture, meals represented acceptance and belonging. And Jesus keeps sharing tables with the wrong people. Again and again. Meanwhile, religious leaders become increasingly unsettled by him. Because Jesus speaks as if the kingdom of God is already breaking into the world around them. Quietly. Like seeds growing underground. Then the story moves toward Jerusalem. Passover season. The city overflowing with pilgrims remembering liberation from Egypt while Roman soldiers watch carefully for rebellion. Tension fills the streets. And during a final meal with his disciples, Jesus breaks bread and says, "This is my body." Hours later, he's arrested. Trials unfold through the night. Torches flicker in courtyards. Peter denies even knowing him before dawn. Then comes the cross. To modern people, crosses often look decorative. In the Roman world, crucifixion was public terror. Victims were displayed outside cities as warnings. Humiliation was part of the punishment. And for Jesus' followers, the crucifixion feels like total collapse. The Messiah wasn't supposed to die. Especially not like this. The sky darkens. His friends scatter. And for a moment, silence takes over the story. Then Sunday morning arrives quietly. Women walk toward the tomb carrying burial spices. Ancient Jewish burial customs involved wrapping bodies carefully with linen and spices to honor the dead. But the stone is already moved. The tomb is empty. And suddenly, the entire biblical story begins connecting backward. The sacrifice. The exile. The longing. The promise. Everything has been moving toward restoration. But the Bible still has one final image left. And it mirrors the beginning perfectly. Revelation, the return home. Revelation is filled with strange symbols ancient readers would have recognized immediately. Beasts representing empires. Babylon symbolizing corrupt power. Dragons embodying chaos and evil. The book was written for vulnerable communities living under Roman pressure and persecution. People wondering if darkness would eventually swallow the world completely. And honestly, that fear still feels familiar. Humanity has built astonishing civilizations. Yet loneliness spreads. Anxiety rises. People search endlessly for meaning, identity, and belonging. The Bible understands something uncomfortable about human nature. External progress does not automatically heal internal emptiness. But revelation does not end with destruction. It ends with reunion. A city filled with light. Tears wiped away. God dwelling with humanity again. And then the story quietly circles back to Genesis. In the beginning, humanity hides among the trees. At the end of the Bible, humanity walks with God again.